Chapter 16. Attacks. The court was silent. Sky's hand tightened on the arm of her chair. If she were in that audience, she wasn't sure what she would be thinking. While Calvin was busy posturing for the crowd, she looked up at Judge Munson. He gave her a slight nod. Once his dramatic pause had the desired result, Calvin went back to talking, describing just how scared he and the others were of her and Jesse. It was ridiculous but effective. The courtroom was riveted on every word that came from his mouth. Sky shook her head. He must have sold a lot of cars back in the day. Another glance at the judge told her he was waiting for her move. She watched as Calvin's exaggerated gestures and felt her stomach churn. It would need to be good. Wait for it, Dylan always said. When your moment comes, you'll know it. Sky hauled in a deep breath. This was her moment. She straightened in her hard wooden chair, changing her demeanor from a cowering, frightened woman to a confident one. You and the others tried to murder me, she said. You viciously attacked both Jesse and I with the intent of further assault. And held me at gunpoint, shot me, and left me for dead. And you killed Jesse's father. Sky's heart raced as she continued. All this you did with no provocation. Everything you have testified to is false except for one thing. We did meet on a deserted road. From that moment to this, you and the other, gentlemen, have done nothing but terrorize Jesse and me. You tried to attack me, you tried to murder me, Calvin said, mocking her as he continued to face the crowd. Pete and Tony snickered in the background. Believe me, if I wanted you assaulted or murdered, then that is what you would have been. Really? I don't remember a whole lot of follow-through. A satisfied little glow started in Sky when he spun around, his eyebrows raised in surprise. You tried a lot of things, but none of them seemed to work out. A girl and a little boy beat you every time. Sky kept her eyes drilled on Calvin as his face became red. Good. This was what she wanted. His attention solely on her. Let him forget the courtroom, the blustering. With them out of his thoughts, maybe he would start the bragging he did in the forest when there was just the 5 of them. He wanted to put her in her place. She would show him just how out of place she was. Putting on the haughtiest expression she was capable of, she provoked him. You talk a good game, Calvin, you sure do. But I've seen nothing of what you say you can do. If you want to be a big threat in the apocalypse, want me to be afraid, then you need to show me what I'm supposed to be afraid of. Sky threw out a hand. You want me on my knees? Tell me what I'm begging for. 'Cause all I see is someone who's now recanting the only thing I have been afraid of. She wrinkled her nose. What a tiny, little nothing of a man you are. Calvin's face and neck flushed a deeper shade of red. His eyes seemed to protrude out of their sockets. He rushed at Sky, furious. She stiffened, grateful for the protection of the people around her. When he reached her, his speech was quick and angry, but quiet enough those in the front rows needed to lean forward to hear. You're going to lose, just face it and be done. Sky tossed her head as if she hadn't a care in the world and crossed her arms. With a little grin, she leaned forward and said, Oh, I don't think so. Why was I ever afraid of you? What have you ever done, really? You can't even shoot straight. She giggled as she sat back in her seat. The veins on the side of his neck stood out as he stuttered, You go back to that road you almost died on. Stop at any house you come to, and all you will find is the dead. Because death is all that we leave behind. Sky rolled her eyes. Here we go again. Calvin clamped iron fingers onto her upper arms and squeezed. She gasped but didn't fight him. Not when she was so close to a breakthrough. Dylan's chair rasped across the wood floor as he jumped from his seat. Judge Munson held a hand up to keep him from interrupting. Gripping Sky tighter, Calvin shook her. His eyes brightened when she winced. You think this is bad, little girl? Snobby little doctor? Be glad you aren't in Barbertown. The name kinda reminded me of barbaric, so I figured, why not? She lowered her gaze so he couldn't see her gleam of triumph. He took it as submission and gave her a smug smile. It was all she could do not to shake him off her. Say it, just say it. Barbertown. The lucky ones are the dead. We left a few alive in case we wanted to return. No one will fight us now. We are kings there, more than kings. Do you know why we are kings? No, Sky said breathlessly, shaking her still lowered head. She was almost dizzy, stretched to her limits, as she waited for him to say the words. Calvin pulled his hands from her as he reminisced. We murdered. Butchered. In every way we could think of. Though I suppose there are a few ways left we could try. Pete chuckled as if taking pleasure in the memories. Tony groaned. Sky leaned back in her seat. It was all over now. Her job was done. Then the horror of his words sunk in. She recoiled as the evil man's face lit, recalling every inhuman detail they had put the people of Barbertown through. The judge finally stopped Calvin mid-sentence. Sickened, but elated the scheme had worked, Sky stared at him. Calvin glanced from Judge Munson to Sky to the crowd, the realization of what he'd said coming over him. He froze for a moment before his hands curled into fists and his jaw clenched. A chill ran through Sky as she saw fury wash over him. His eyes came back to her. If it hadn't been personal before, it certainly was now. Her heart slowed as she tried to scramble away. It was too late. Calvin drew his fist back and slammed her below the eye. The force of the blow bounced her head against the desk, causing a second explosion in her skull. She slid to the floor limp, barely conscious. Calvin leaped on her. He found the soft area of her stomach and pummeled her, leaving her fighting for breath. When Sky managed to curl into a ball, he went for her kidneys. Dylan's growl made its way through her pain and fear. Calvin clenched at her as he was pulled away. It had only been seconds, but Sky laid there broken, gasping for air. But even then, she knew how fortunate she was. If she and Jesse hadn't gotten the upper hand that day on the road, who knew what further abuses these men's monstrous imaginations would have heaped on them? Tears rolled down her cheeks as much for the town of Barbertown as for herself. The obscenities Calvin screamed broke through her thoughts as Dylan and Wade dragged him further away. But no part of her felt sorry for him. Not even when his yells of anger turned to pain from the solid blows raining on him. The people of Colton were taking revenge for the deaths of their neighboring town.